Good evening, everybody. I appreciate you all being patient with us as we work through a few technical issues this evening. We just wanted to make sure that everything was all set with Revere TV and our interpretation services we provide there. But thank you all for coming here today to Revere City Hall on this beautiful evening. I'm Tom Skrowski. I'm the Chief of Planning and Community Development for the City of Revere. Look forward to talking with you tonight about the Route 1A Riverfront Improvement Project and all of the exciting riverfront improvements related to it. Just to briefly introduce our project team tonight, again, it's me, Tom Skrowski, Chief of Planning and Community Development. I'm joined by Julie DeMauro, our Transportation Coordinator. Julie will be monitoring the Zoom chat throughout the meeting, so if there are any questions that come in, if you are listening online or on Revere TV and you want to add any questions for us to answer, happy to answer those throughout the process through the chat box. We're also joined by Peter Robluski from Howard Stein Hudson, who's the civil engineer who's been running point on this project. And we also have Spanish translation from Milena Cuadrosez on Revere TV and Susana Carella, who is here in person. And just in case anybody is looking for Spanish interpretation, we've arranged for Spanish language interpretation to be available during this meeting. Please see Susana in the back of the room for a headset if you are interested. And I want to, before we get started, just a special thank you to all the elected officials in the room. Thank you, Councilor Powers, Councilor Rizzo, and Representative Turco for joining us this evening. Look forward to hearing from you all and all the great residents we have on hand tonight to talk about this project. So to give just a brief overview of the agenda, we'll talk about the project at a very high level, an overview, and dig into the Riverfront Master Plan, which I think many of you are all quite familiar with and which really provided the basis for the work that we're doing and what brought us here tonight. We'll talk about the project goals for the roadway improvements, and then I'll hand it over to our friends at HSH to talk through the technical aspects of the design, work through the timeline, and then we'll both together answer any frequently asked questions we often hear about the project and provide contact information in a way for you all to stay engaged throughout the duration of this project from design to construction. And then we'll answer any questions you have. And again, if you are listening on Revere TV or on Zoom, if you do have any questions, you can always put them in the Zoom chat box and we'll be happy to answer them at the end of the meeting. And similarly for the folks in attendance tonight, at the end of the meeting, we'll have plenty of opportunity for Q&A if you have any questions that were unanswered after we went through the presentation. So briefly, just to give an overview of the project, this is the whole riverfront area, but we are going to be talking specifically about the roadway improvements that will come along with this project. This meeting is not a meeting to review Gibson Park and the amazing renovation plans we have for the park. We have Elle Baker and Frank Stringy from my office who have been leading that effort. There will be a public meeting to come in October to discuss the nuts and bolts of that amazing project. But today we'll really focus on the roundabout and the roadway improvements. This will not be a review of the nearby mixed-use development, strictly about the roadway. And similarly, I often hear a lot of questions about the General Edwards Bridge reconstruction project. That's still quite a few years out, and it's a bit premature to look at and examine how this would link into the project. So we're primarily going to stay focused once again on the project area here. So in order to talk about the roundabout, you can't do that without getting into the Riverfront Master Plan and the master planning process that preceded it. And it was really a Herculean effort by a lot of folks that came before me in the Department of Planning and Community Development and the Development Advisory Group that helped build the project scope. So the Riverfront Master Plan was all about improving connectivity, resiliency, and creating public access to the waterfront. It involved renovating recreation areas with some really important improvements to Gibson Park. And it was about providing opportunities for new development and new uses, such as the boathouse, which I'll touch on in just a second. But the fundamental rationale behind this master plan was to create an iconic new gateway into the city and resiliency and recreational improvements that are a benefit both for the neighborhood and the city at large. So the plan was endorsed by the Revere City Council in 2021, and since then, we've received over $15 million in state grants and earmarks. Again, Representative Turco, thank you for your support there, and the other folks at the state delegation that brought a lot of dollars into Revere to help make this project happen, and others within the riverfront. We actually just learned we received another grant today, but it's super top secret, and I am not allowed to divulge such information yet, but just so you know, we have many more grant applications in the pipeline, and we're always looking for opportunities to enhance our project here at the riverfront and looking to enhance it through outside sources of funding. Since the Riverfront Master Plan was adopted, we acquired the boathouse and have initiated designs to renovate that boathouse to be a community amenity that is really linked in to the Gibson Park improvements. And of course, the roundabout designs are underway, which we'll discuss tonight. And similarly, the Gibson Park designs are underway and will be another item for a public meeting and discussion later in October. And then, of course, the mixed-use development is under construction with a scheduled completion date of next November 2024. So back to the roundabout. The roundabout was developed as one of the real key components of the Riverfront Master Plan. It kind of ties everything else together from a transportation engineering standpoint, with the ultimate goal of minimizing the traffic impact on the Riverside and Point of Pines neighborhood and creating more effective accessibility with bicycle and pedestrian access to Gibson Park, improving vehicular access to Gibson Park as well, with a project that will follow immediately this roundabout project, and I'll talk about that in just a moment. The project goal also seeks to improve the interchange right there on 1A with a roundabout intersection that gives enhanced access to 1A northbound and southbound compared to what's there today. And very importantly, it looks to improve safety and providing emergency vehicle access, especially for Revere Fire, to get easy and quick access into Gibson Park and Gibson Point. And ultimately safe and family-friendly pedestrian and bicycle access to and from the Point of Pines neighborhood, which currently is difficult, if not impossible, to do. So to get into the technical aspects of the design of this roundabout, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Pete, from HSH to talk things through. Thanks, Pete.
Thank you, Tom. And as Tom mentioned, my name is Peter Bleski with Howard Stein Hudson. We're the consulting engineers hired to design this project. I'm going to get into some of the technical design here. And the first thing I want to reiterate is what Tom said, that the scope of this project that I'm working on really is the roundabout itself, and that is limited to MassDOT highway right-of-way. It's all within the state right-of-way. It's a Revere proponent project. It's Revere got the grant funding for this. Revere is the lead behind this project, but it's all within state right-of-way. Some of the major project constraints that we dealt with on this project were ramp lengths. The on-ramp, which we designed, has a stopping site distance that we needed to make sure we had enough distance to stop going for traffic in the roundabout. We had to provide enough length there. We had to provide enough length for the off-ramp as well, stopping site distance, of course. The on-ramp, and I'm not sure if anyone's familiar with the area, but the on-ramp actually merges onto the portion of 1A where there's actually a crosswalk across 1A right at that location. And so we had to be able to stop cars merging onto the highway with enough safe distance in case there are pedestrians on the highway. So it's a really tightly constrained area. And those are the horizontal constraints. The vertical constraints are that we're at a pretty low elevation. As you all know in Revere, we're close to sea level pretty much anywhere in this area. But we also are bound by and I'll show you in the next slide here, but the roadway that goes beneath 1A, the underpass, that bridge deck, we cannot change our clearance above to be higher or lower on that bridge deck. So our roundabout elevation, the center of our intersection, had to stay essentially the same grading that it is now. With all that information to help us determine what the best intersection would be, we performed some pretty comprehensive intersection analysis. This was done in concert with MassDOT and with Revere. We talked with MassDOT traffic engineers. We talked with the Boston office, with the District 4 office. Got some really good feedback and input on what types of intersections we approved, you know, a controlled stop intersection, keeping it the way it is, where it's just kind of the Linway continues on to be an on-ramp and an off-ramp, and there's not really a defined intersection there. And after a lot of iteration, what it came down to was that the roundabout is not only the preferred and best option, but basically the only option that was going to work for this area. And it works really well. The project proponents, as I mentioned, Revere, you know, they are leading the charge here. This is a Revere project. We're doing the technical design with Revere as a client, but MassDOT is highly involved with this project because it is all on MassDOT property. So when it comes to, you know, meeting regulations for traffic volumes or for safety and any sort of state regulations, MassDOT's reviewing this project every step of the way, and they are well aware of this. They are heavily involved. And speaking of traffic impacts, right now, we do not anticipate that there's going to be any congestion added due to this project. The development itself that's going up in that area is 290 unit development of condos, I believe, and that the traffic study done associated with that, I think and I'm not a traffic engineer, so I don't want to speak to this directly, but I believe that we had fewer than 100 daily trips generated during peak hour. I'm sorry, fewer than 100 peak hour trips generated due to that development. And with the capacity in our roundabout and the efficiency that it improves in the area, there shouldn't be an added impact to the congestion that's already there. And I know everyone here is aware of the congestion on 1A and that there is traffic there. This project should only improve that. Improve the traffic that's out there now. So to get a look at this is our concept plan. You can see here, I'm not sure if you can see my cursor. No, that's okay. So at the center of the roundabout there, you can see that's basically where the eye of our project sits. And everything that's shown with limits on this concept plan is part of our project scope. Now, these concept plans have been reviewed and approved by MassDOT. They've been reviewed and approved by Revere. This is where the project sits today. And you can see that we're adding the sidewalk, and on the bottom of that concept plan, you can see the beginning of a shared use path. And that shared use path continues all the way down to the intersection in front of the fire station and continues on to that Port-au-Pines neighborhood. This roundabout stays completely within the state right-of-way, and you can see, I'm not sure how well you can see it on your screen here, but there's a faint red line that defines the state boundary, and the entire scope of this project is within that state boundary. Now, you can also see here that Gibson Park is, you know, adjacent to our project, and the next slide I'm going to show you is a future scope of work. Whoop. This scope of work here, which is not part of this project. And I want to stress that this is a concept plan that's not nearly to the level of design that the roundabout is. This is a concept plan that shows providing access into Gibson Park, into the existing driveway, through the development at 22 Whitten with an easement that Revere would negotiate with that developer. This is something that we are a proponent of this design. This is something that Howard and Hudson produced. We believe this works well for the area. On the concept plan here, you can see that it looks as if we're going right through one of the tennis courts, but we're working in conjunction with the designers for Gibson Park, those architectural designers and planners, and there is not going to be a tennis court there as the current plan shows. So that tennis court's being moved to a separate location within Gibson Park. We wouldn't be taking away any tennis courts, and this is what we currently feel is the best option. But again, I want to stress this is a concept plan only. And then going back to, I'm sorry.
If I could also just stress one point from the master planning process. Although I wasn't here when the RiverFront master plan took place, I understand the importance of having Gibson Park access coming off of that roundabout. I know that was really one of the main factors why we developed this in the first place, was to keep any additional traffic, not only to the mixed-use development, but to the amenities that were coming to the park off of Mills Ave, off of the Riverside neighborhood. I just want to assure everybody here, this is, what Pete had just showed is our preferred alternative, and we're working with MassDOT on working towards final plans here. This is happening simultaneously with the design of the roundabout, and we will not have a project happen here without access from the roundabout to Gibson Park. It's very likely going to look like this, an access road coming off of the roundabout itself, but we are aware of the neighborhood concerns, and we're going to work tirelessly to make sure that gets done. Sorry, Pete.
No, thank you, Tom. Those are great points. Oh, goodness. So, and I'll get back to that slide in a second here, but this is the slide that shows the larger concept plan that shows how Port of Pines can access that neighborhood. And the blue path of travel there, the kind of light blue path of travel, shows the new proposed access that is within this scope of work in this project. And it shows how bikes and pedestrians will be able to access the park, within the scope of work of this project. And on top of what Tom just said, I want to stress, I am being very deliberate in saying that it's a separate scope of work and a separate project to get this Gibson Park access that we're showing here. This is going, in an ideal world, what we're hoping for is that construction will follow immediately or happen subsequently with the roundabout construction process. One of the reasons why it's a separate scope of work and a separate project is because the permitting required to do any sort of vehicle access work in a public park is tremendous, and it's comprehensive, and it takes a lot of extra permitting that by bifurcating the two projects and keeping the permitting separate and contained within that Gibson Park access project, we're really going to be able to streamline both projects together. To the public, we hope that it is one comprehensive master plan and that it appears that way, but within the scope of this project itself, they are separate and distinct projects. So talking about the design process, I mentioned that we completed our 25% design. We're on that second bullet here, and the purpose of today is to introduce this project to the public, to take public comments, to discuss, the plans, where we are, where we're going, and to gather feedback and to make this, something that works for the community. The subsequent steps that are following are the structural design. We already have our permits in place to take our geotechnical borings so that we can design where our new walls will be, what type of foundation we're going to use, and to get that structural plan approved and permitted by MassDOT. Our environmental permitting, which although it is far reduced because it doesn't include parkland, it is still comprehensive. We still have to get permitting from MEPA and NEPA and several state agencies to make sure this project is environmentally permitted. We've begun that process, and as we continue there, we'll get to our 100% design. The next step in our process is a combined 100%, 75%, 100% design is what we're calling it. And we're going to discuss those plans with MassDOT and Revere, take any comments from those agencies, and finalize our design after the permitting and structural work is complete, and come up with our construction documents and advertise this project for construction. So right now, the timeline that we have here, these are years and not dates, and that is intentional. 2024, we're anticipating our design to be complete. The reason that is a year and not a date or a season is because we're not sure what the extent of the permitting that's going to be required. We're going to follow every single regulation and law that's required. We're going to make sure we meet the public permitting process. But there are some areas where we're not sure if we will need to file a full extent, for example, a Chapter 91 permit, or if we're going to be, if we're not going to have to file a Chapter 91 permit. And that is, I can give more context on that if anyone has interest, but essentially there are filled tidelands that this area sits on, but the filled tidelands, excuse me, the functional use is not going to change because they're already paved over and they abut up against our project, they don't go through them. So these types of gray areas that we haven't resolved yet, if everything is streamlined and goes well, this could be 6 months sooner than we expect, or if it's as comprehensive and extensive as we believe, it could be 6 months longer. So that's why these are years and not dates. Similarly, that's why we believe construction to begin in 2025. Now, that said, we're hoping to begin it as early as possible. And if that is somehow spring of 2024 or summer of 2024, excellent. We're ready for that. We have the funding secured, and we're going to try to expedite this as quickly as possible. But we also want to be realistic and make sure that we are not setting ourselves up for failure. So with that in mind, we're anticipating a 1 to 2 year construction period. Again, we think this is going to take up to 2 years, and if we can work with our contractor and get all the relevant parties involved and work comprehensively or work collectively to reduce that time frame, and we can construct it in a year, that's what we will aim to do. So here we have our FAQs, and I believe, Tom, are these you or me?
Yeah.
Okay.
So a lot of this has been addressed through the presentation itself, but just to reiterate some of the frequently asked questions we often hear in the community, how can you access the park from Point of Pines? So with this roundabout and shared use path, you'll be able to access through the path. Design for the shared use path that Peter just showed is under review currently with MassDOT, but we anticipate that following along with the rest of the project scope. And again, vehicle access, that additional access road will be a subsequent project that we're going to be working simultaneously on. It's not as though one will follow the other in design. We're doing it in tandem. It's just a matter of which permitting tracks we have to follow at the state level, because there is extensive state permitting that's going to impact this project. Why a roundabout? I think Pete covered that pretty well. We reviewed over a dozen intersection alternatives with MassDOT and Revere, and this was really the best and the only viable option. And how will vehicles access Gibson Park? We touched on that already. But this last piece is an important one, and hopefully you all can mark your calendars. So again, we have Al Baker and Frank Stringy here from my office as well, who will be tentatively, they have a meeting scheduled October 18th at 6 p.m. The venue is to be determined at this time. But this will be the opportunity to talk about the full scope of the Riverfront Park improvements that are complementary to but distinct from this project. And feel free to reach out to Al, Frank, or myself if you have any questions about that project. And then in terms of the outreach and the comment period for the roundabout and the roadway improvements themselves, all presentation materials will be available online under our projects and planning initiatives portal on the City of Revere's website. The public comment period will run from Wednesday, September 27th through to Wednesday, October 11th. All comments should be sent through email to Julie Demaro at jdemaro@revere.org or through mail at the address that's listed in the PowerPoint. And in addition to that, this, again, presentation will be made publicly available, but you've got my contact information here, both email and phone. Feel free to contact me with any questions you might have, and be happy to talk through both the roadway itself and some of the other subsequent projects related to it. But we've done a lot of talking tonight, so now I'm going to stop for a moment and see if anyone here has any questions. And we could just take them with a simple raise of hand if you do have them. Yes?
For access, pedestrian access currently in.
Yes, it will. The lighting is going to be improved under the bridge as well as part of that. The access under the bridge will be relocated to the other side of the street. Okay. But in addition to the shared use path. Yeah.
So the question was about pedestrian access from Point of Pines, and Pete had noted the question asked, is it still going to be within the underpass as it is today? It will be, but the underpass will be better lit. The shared use path will be on the other side of the street, and I'll let Pete take the rest from here.
Yes, thank you. Sorry about that. So yes, it will be continue to walk under the bridge. We're trying not to encourage people to go walk up on 1A. It's much safer to go under the bridge, but we're going to improve that passage as well and make sure that there are controlled intersections. I'm not sure if you guys can share my screen here again so that you can see what I'm looking at. But and I know this is difficult to see. Maybe I can zoom in here. So this area, whoops. as part of the scope of work on this project, we're also going to be improving this intersection on the Linway and, you know, at improving these crosswalks that are out there. There's a couple right now that they're not they're not super well defined, and that accessibility is going to be improved all the way down through that Linway intersection. Great. So the question was, what do the letters B, C, and D represent? And again, I know this is small. What those show are basically starting points and just different destinations that people might have within this area.
Representative Turco.
A couple of questions. First, I recognize General Edwards Bridge is a separate project, but can you show me, like, do you have a slide that shows where the bridge is and where this roundabout is? Just intuitively, it seems to me, don't you kind of need to know where the bridge is going to be in order to make sure the roundabout's going to work?
Yes, the question was, just for folks in the audience, related to the General Edwards Bridge and where this work lies in relation to the bridge improvement project, because it was noted intuitively to design this roundabout, we have to have an understanding of where the bridge improvements will go, and I'll hand the question itself to Peter.
Sure. Thanks, Tom. And again, you know, we don't know a lot about that bridge yet. What we do know and what we've talked with MassDOT about is we want assurance that the work we're doing now is not going to be replaced by that General Edwards Bridge and have to be reconstructed. And that's what we have with our goal in mind. So the General Edwards Bridge, you can see on the screen here, our plan shows the portion of, oh, I bet I can highlight. Let's do this. So the portion of 1A that we have paved here, that's only the outer extent. That's only the shoulder and the outside driving lane. We're not touching anything on 1A that is, you know, plan view south of this on the lower portion, the southbound side, or the northbound side, because with any General Edwards Bridge realignment, the plan is to move it south on this map, and that's not true south, but you know, plan south. The General Edwards Bridge, if it's realigned at all, is going to move farther south, which would mean that our project, our roundabout, our ramps, would only increase their stopping site distances, and their stopping lengths and their merge lengths would only get improved with civil engineering requirements. So those highway design standards are going to be met as long as that bridge realignment moves not at all or plan south. And that's what we have in mind with this project, is the lowest impact possible to any potential future project.
Can I ask one follow-up? Thank you for that answer. One follow-up is, again, unrelated, but Gibson Park, the Commonwealth Environmental Affairs has required the city to go for a much more exhaustive environmental review. Is there a possibility that this project could be put into that same box?
Yes, the question was asked by Representative Turco if, similar to Gibson Park, which has had to go more extensive environmental permitting than it would have had to in years past because of a legislative change that was made a few years back. And the question was whether the roundabout will be subject to that enhanced environmental permitting as well. And the answer is yes. And that's why we're also a bit conservative on our time estimates and could certainly use the support at the State House. This is a project, one of many that is in this new legislation is impacting throughout both in Revere and throughout the Commonwealth, where there is an additional trigger for work happening within environmental justice neighborhoods that it has to go additional and more extensive permitting, which is a well-intentioned law that's had the unintended benefit or unintended consequence, I should say, of creating significant regulatory hurdles for us to get projects done here in Revere, and at significant cost. These permits are not cheap, and the permitting process is lengthy and expensive. So that's why we were a bit conservative on the time estimates here. And to tie it into a question I did see on the Zoom, somebody asked, what will be the plan for emergency vehicle access in the interim when the mixed-use development is completed and potentially this roundabout is not yet finished? And I would give a two-part answer to that. The first part is we're going to do everything within our power to try to align the design and construction of this project as best we can with the mixed-use project, which is slated for completion in 2024. Of course, it's not going to be done right away, and there will be that interim period, and we are working with the state to identify an emergency access plan in the interim. And that's really the best we have for an answer on that question at the moment, but it's something that we're all well aware of, Revere Fire is well aware of, and we're doing our best to take care of that issue. Yes?
Once we have all the permits and everything is ready to go, how long do you estimate this project to take? Or how long is this going to hurt the residents? That they're not going to be able to get home, they're not going to be able, how long is this traffic going to impact in the Pines?
The question was about how long the construction of this project itself will impact residents in Riverside and the Point of Pines neighborhood, and I will defer to Pete on that answer.
Sure. So, like I said, we anticipate conservatively a 2-year construction period. Now, that said, we're going to do what we can to reduce that as much as possible. We will work double or triple crews, and what that means is an 8-hour shift followed immediately by a separate 8-hour shift, followed immediately by a separate 8-hour shift, and trying to work concurrent operations to expedite this project, to get it done quickly. You know, our goal is to do this as quickly as possible. When I show a schedule that has a 2-year construction period, I'm trying to show what could be realistic. And we hope that's not the case, but it very well could be. To address the question of how is it going to impact residents and their current traffic and people who live there, you know, we're trying to minimize that as much as possible. And again, there we go. The question was, will it impact the Linway? Probably yes, but construction will be scheduled and we'll do our traffic studies, we'll do our construction planning so that we can minimize that impact to peak hour, you know, AM and PM, rush hour commutes. We'll try to minimize any impact during that time specifically. The benefit that we have going for us here is that the work you see here on the Linway and the work that you see on 1A itself, that is minor resurfacing work. And that's not going to be, that work takes, you know, a day to pave it, and then a week later you stripe it. And that's really minimal impact. The large construction work is this ramp here, the roundabout, and this ramp here. And that's all on top of infrastructure that it's either new infrastructure or it's relocating those on and off ramps. So those Linway ramps that go up onto Route 1A, we'll probably have to reroute traffic during construction to find alternate routes there. But when you get down off of the Linway here, you know, this is a quick construction project that shouldn't have a major impact. Does that answer your question?
It answers the question, but it doesn't solve the problem.
Yeah,
With the beach traffic, with the Linway traffic, with the traffic coming from 1A,
Are you in the Port of Pines? I'm sorry.
Point of Pines, yes.
Yeah.
And so the point was made that this will, for a period of time, exacerbate traffic conditions in an area that's already clogged, particularly in the summer, and we certainly appreciate that. And we'll appreciate everyone's patience throughout the process. And, you know, at the end of the design period, once we institute construction, we want to maintain open lines of communication with the city and the residents to make sure that your needs are being met best we can. Of course, you know, there's nothing we can do about really disruptive construction, but what we can do is make sure we're being responsive to your concerns and we're being communicative, and that's really the best we've got. That's the goal. And so we're going to do our best to meet that goal. And Councilor Rizzo, you had a question?
Yeah, well, that was a question that I was going to ask as far as what type of impact is this going to have on people who live down. They've already been impacted by all the new construction that's gone on, including the 290 building. So, but can you just clarify for me, roundabout itself, that's going to take people both north
Right, so first point was made, again, kind of reiterating the traffic concerns, which we hear loud and clear. And one thing I would add on the procurement side, what we're looking at, controlling what we can control at the city. We're looking at procurement methods to incentivize the contractor to work quicker. So hopefully we can skip a construction season and get this done sooner than we'd hope to avoid the hangups that are inevitably going to happen. But to answer your other question about the actual location, I might take us back to the first slide where I first introduced the project. So, in relation to, the cursor is up there. Okay, so, again, to the earlier question about the General Edwards Bridge and 1A and where the roundabout is in relation to that, it's in this general area here. So, well, it's right in that white shaded area, so not quite where the apartments are, but that's where the existing on and off ramps are today. Yes. And that's, a rough, I put a circle on a map 5 minutes before the meeting, but that's roughly where it's going to happen. So Point of Pines is over here, Riverside neighborhood over here, Gibson Park. Correct. So it'll be a new configuration off of the ramp. Yes, Councilor Powers?
I'm sure you're aware of the project that was planned for going in, so the redoing the boathouse down here. This project would be turned around quick.
The question was posed about the other work happening within the Riverfront Master Plan project area. So we received a $2 million congressional earmark to conduct a berm along Mills Ave to deal with some of the flooding issues there. And in addition to that, as I mentioned in the presentation, we did purchase the boathouse and are currently undergoing design work and applying for a variety of different grant funds to see that project through to completion. And the question was, will these come into conflict with one another? And we are going to do our best to scaffold these projects so they're happening one after another, and they're not happening all together all the time. I'm sure there will be moments of overlap, particularly with the Gibson Park work and the roundabout. The work for the boathouse will follow after the roundabout work primarily. There's going to be some environmental permitting and remediation work done at the boathouse in advance of the construction. And the Mills Ave work, it might be a bit premature to say where that follows along too, but we're all within the same department, and we're going to do our best to make sure this work aligns well in a way that minimizes disruption with the neighborhood. But I wouldn't be honest with you all if I didn't say there's going to be a lot of construction happening in this area in the next few years. Yes. There was a question as to whether this work would lead to traffic being rerouted through the Point of Pines neighborhood. I don't know if you have any, you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. So the short answer, I don't know yet. But that type of information that people are flying through the neighborhood and we don't want that to happen, yeah, absolutely. That's where, please do submit a public comment. Like, in addition to the one you're making right now, if you can email that and say that's a concern that you have for the Point of Pines neighborhood, that's something that we will take into account in it's a temporary traffic control plan, and it's a set of plan documents that we create for construction, and it's specifically set out to design the traffic routes that cars will take during construction. So those are the types of things that'll come into consideration. Now, when you say it was National Grid that had, I don't know if that was like an emergency situation or a planned project. Well, a lot of times National Grid is in a situation where they can't plan out their, not to speak on their behalf, but they can't plan out their traffic routing. And we're going to try to preempt that, problem and avoid it completely. So I don't anticipate routing traffic through a neighborhood. That's never the plan. And we always want to try to use, keep highway traffic on highways and use other ramps. I sincerely doubt we would route them through there. But again, until we develop that temporary traffic control plan, I can't answer you in this moment, honestly. But
Yeah, short answer, any feedback that can help us create an effective plan. Long answer, there's the plan and then how we adapt to the plan on the fly. And I think that entails continuous communication with my department, with the mayor's office. And I think we've got a lot of committed folks within the Department of Planning and Community Development that can take in your feedback. I know we heard some feedback on a construction project and its impacts to parking at Gibson Park recently. And got to give a lot of commendation to Frank and Elle for stepping up and helping to resolve that issue. But we only hear about that through the feedback we hear from you as the residents. So encourage you, once we start construction, to continue that open line of communication with us, and we're happy to work with you on any concerns you might have. Yes, question? Gibson Park will not be closed during the construction of the roundabout.
So there's a couple of questions from the participants on Zoom, and two of the questions are the same. They're asking about the recent traffic counts that were conducted. Have there been any additional traffic counts conducted since the master planning process of 2020?
So I can tell you that we did, I believe we got traffic counts in 2022 to follow up on this project. And I know we took them in 2020. I'm assuming that the comment is related to concerns over traffic pre and post COVID. And that's something that we hear a lot, that people are concerned that traffic volumes have really spiked since COVID. I believe we have taken traffic counts as recently as 2022, and that is what's driving our design. But Julie, if it's okay, I'd like to follow up with that and confirm it after this meeting in an official response.
Was there a second question, Julie? Or was that just the two?
That it was the same question from two participants
Okay,
in the chat on Zoom.
great, thank you.
Yep.
Councilor Rizzo?
One more question. We talked about some grant funding earlier, but I recall or don't mention overall project.
Great question. So it was a question regarding the cost of the project and who's paying for it. So there are two primary sources that are paying for it. I'll get to that, and then the cost, I'll hand it over to Pete. But we received a $5 million Mass Works grant, which is a grant for infrastructure projects that come along with development. And on top of that, we received an $8 million state earmark, which again couldn't have happened without our state delegation. So taken together, we have through those two sources $13 million for projects within the riverfront, of which about $8 million and change will go towards the roundabout, and Pete will give you the exact answer.
Yeah. So right now, our construction estimate for the roundabout project is just under $7 million. And with that, we have very much, in big, bold letters, warned, please be cautious with this estimate, because we've just seen construction cost estimates going up. And with a construction schedule anticipated to start either in a year or 2 years, $7 million today might be $9 million 2 years from now. And we're trying to anticipate those changes. We've included an escalator on our cost just in inflation. We've included an appreciation in our cost on just cost of daily increase. And that's not to say we're charging more for that, just to put an estimate of what the construction bid will be on that project. So right now, our estimate for the construction project is just under $7 million. That said, we're at 25% design, and we're still at least a year out from advertising, so it's a very, it's precise. We went through and measured every single thing that we've included in our project, but the level of accuracy is still going to be refined over the next year or so of design.
So the question was regarding CIT, Community Improvement Trust money from the Red Gate development that went towards the, that could potentially go towards this project were there to be cost overruns. I think we feel pretty confident just with the earmark and the Mass Works funding that we have enough to cover the cost of the project. As to the actual number for the CIT, I don't know if anyone else on my team might have that number offhand. Frank? 400,000? And we still are awaiting some of that money upon occupancy. So conceivably, it could go towards this work as well. Great question. Yes? So the question was regarding the benefits to doing this project before the General Edwards Bridge project is complete. And, you know, primarily, the main benefit is the GE Bridge is a big unknown and is outside of our control. I've heard tentatively that there'll be a 25% design public hearing next November, which is essentially, you know, they will be next November where we are today in design for this project. The difference being it's a massive infrastructure project that if we think our permitting is complicated, that takes it to a whole nother level of complexity, cost, regulatory review. I'm not entirely confident we'll see that bridge rebuilt. Some might know better than me, but hopefully in my lifetime. I'm being a bit glib there, but I think it's going to be a while. And so I think the primary benefit of doing the roundabout now is we need to have improved access to that mixed-use development now. We need to have improved access to Gibson Park and the boathouse much sooner than the GE Bridge timetable. So, you know, again, we've been coordinating and communicating with MassDOT, so we're not tripping over one another on our designs, but we need to move a little quicker than they do sometimes. You're welcome. And I did see another question. Yes. Right. The question was regarding utilizing Mills Ave for construction vehicles, and a lot of them were parking along Mills Ave and in Gibson Park. And again, I mentioned that earlier. That was a big learning process for us, and I think similarly with some of the concerns we heard at the Point of Pines, I at least feel fortunate that those have happened and we can learn from them and we can use it to develop a temporary construction plan as Pete had mentioned, but hopefully also just collaborating with all of our partners at City Hall to make sure that, again, this isn't going to be perfect. We're going to have a lot of traffic cones out and there will be disruption, but I think we're going to do our best to work within what's in our control to avoid obstructive access into Mills Ave and Gibson Park. But, you know, there will be construction vehicles in and around the area. It's a construction project, but we'll do our best to minimize the impact.
I can add to that a little bit.
Yes.
And just to piggyback on that, let me see if I can find the slide here. The area next to the roundabout that is proposed, right around here, this is all going to be, you know, you can see the existing ramp. That's going to be removed. We have a great construction staging area already in place. So that'll be where we direct construction vehicles, the heavy machinery, and even the contractor, pickup trucks for daily parking. This is where we'll put the construction staging area so that they're, as best we can, we'll try to consolidate it into one point so that it's not impacting the neighborhoods, and that is being restricted to this construction project area. Yeah. I believe it. I believe it. Sure. Any other questions?
One other question that came in on the Zoom was asking for us to make a commitment that traffic to and from Gibson Park and the Red Gate development will not go through the Riverside neighborhood. And again, there might be a period of time where it's premature for me to give you a complete 100% commitment that in that period of time before the roundabout's done and this development's up and running, I can't say for certain because that's outside of my control. I would have to consult my colleagues at Revere Police and our other permitting bodies within City Hall. But what I can say unequivocally is when this project's done, there's going to be access to Gibson Park through the roundabout, through an access road, and we want to make sure that folks are not driving to and from the park through the Riverside neighborhood, and I can say that for certain. Any other questions? Great. Well, I appreciate everyone taking the time today. Thank you for my colleagues at HSH and the folks on the call and on the Zoom as well. Thank you, Julie Demaro, for handling this process. And again, we'll keep you updated on project progress as we're moving forward, both on this and Gibson Park. And hopefully you can attend the meeting in October as well to learn more about the great things happening there. Thank you for coming tonight.